Admiral Krell Brightscale stood at the observation deck of the Galactic Unity Station, his forearms crossed in what humans would call a skeptical stance. His crystalline scales caught the light of Earth's sun, casting rainbow refractions across the polished floor. Below him, through the reinforced quantum glass, lay the sprawling campus of humanity's first intergalactic military academy. 300 years of warfare, he muttered to his assistant Pip Quicksilver, a diminutive being composed primarily of floating light particles. 3 centuries of the brightest military minds in 27 galaxies failing to end this conflict, and now these Deathworlders think they can solve it by teaching different species to play nice together? Pip's light particles swirled in what Krell recognized as amusement. With all due respect, Admiral, that's exactly what they're proposing. And if the preliminary results are anything to go by— Preliminary results! Krell's secondary arms gesticulated wildly, while his primary ones remained firmly crossed. They've been at this for barely 2 Earth years. That's not even a standard galactic week in terms of proper military training. Below them, the graduation ceremony was beginning. Thousands of beings from across the known universe gathered in neat formations. The sight was unexpected. A towering Chronaxian warrior stood shoulder to shoulder with a mistwalker from the Nebula Realms. A human cadet was helping adjust the atmospheric suit of a deep space dweller. "Look at them," Krell grumbled, his scales shifting to a deeper blue of disapproval. "No proper formation protocols. No species-specific battalions. It's chaos. Pure chaos." "Perhaps," Pip chimed, his particles forming a rough approximation of a smile. "That's exactly the point." The human in charge of the academy, Commander Jack Stone. And wasn't that just perfectly human, having a name that sounded like a mineral, stepped up to the podium. His voice boomed through the station's communication systems. "Welcome to the first graduation ceremony of Earth's Intergalactic Defense Academy. When we started this program, everyone said it was impossible. They said different species couldn't train together, couldn't fight together, couldn't live together. Well, look around you." Krell did look around, and what he saw made his third heart skip a beat. The formations below were shifting, each graduate moving with perfect synchronization despite their wildly different physiologies. It was like watching a living, breathing puzzle assemble itself. "These cadets," Stone continued, "have achieved something unprecedented. They've learned to see beyond their biological differences, beyond their cultural barriers, beyond the very prejudices that have kept this war burning for 3 centuries. "Impossible," Krell whispered, but his scales were beginning to shift toward the purple of intrigue. "They said humans were too young, too reckless, too primitive to join the Galactic Council." Stone's voice carried pride and challenge in equal measure. "Maybe that's exactly why we're the ones who can end this war. Because we're too stubborn to accept that some conflicts are endless, too naive to believe that different species can't work together, and just crazy enough to prove everyone wrong." As the ceremony continued below, Krell found himself leaning forward, his skepticism warring with fascination. These humans, these Deathworlders from a gravity well that would crush most species, might just be onto something. And if they were, well, wouldn't that be the biggest joke the universe had ever played on them all? Later that evening, aboard the Galactic Council's flagship Star Eternal, Admiral Krell Brightscale faced a room full of the most decorated military commanders from across the universe. The holographic displays floating around them painted a grim picture, one that made his scales shift to the grey of deep concern. "Another training facility lost," announced General Blaze Starweaver of the Phoenix Collective, his flame-like appendages flickering with frustration. "This time on Centauri Prime. 37 cadets dead, 15 critically wounded. Same story. Species incompatibility leading to training accidents." "Not to mention," rumbled Fleet Commander Thunder in silence, her gaseous form condensing to express displeasure, "the complete breakdown of command structure in the Orion sector. Traditional battle formations fall apart, when you mix species with different reaction times and sensory capabilities. Krell pulled up the casualty statistics with a wave of his lower right arm. The numbers danced in the air, each digit seeming to mock their collective failure. Our casualty rates have increased by 300% since we started trying to integrate our forces. The Harmony Collective's entire 7th Fleet was lost because their crystalline admirals couldn't comprehend the temporal perception of their methane-breathing allies. "Ha!" barked Admiral Sunlance, his bioluminescent skin pulsing with sarcastic patterns. "You want to talk about failures? My best veteran commander, hero of 1,000 battles, tried to lead a mixed-species squadron last week. Know what happened? They flew straight into a quantum storm because half the crew couldn't process his orders fast enough, while the other half executed them too quickly." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices, each species trying to communicate in their preferred method, from subsonic rumbles to telepathic bursts. Krell raised all 4 arms for silence, his scales now a deep burgundy of authority. "The numbers don't lie," he said, pulling up more holographic displays. "Traditional military doctrines are failing us. The Star Empire's legendary 100-year academy, 17 major training accidents this cycle alone. The Nebula Warriors' elite combat school, dissolved after their atmospheric training chambers malfunctioned, nearly killing an entire class of gravity-sensitive species." Commander Whisper of Stars, appearing as a shimmering constellation in roughly humanoid form, spoke in pulses of light. "Our veterans, our most experienced warriors, they're lost. Fighting this war the same way for 3 centuries has made them inflexible. They can't adapt to mixed species units because they've never had to. And let's be brutally honest here," added General Starweaver, flames dimming to a thoughtful blue. "Our traditional strategies aren't exactly working against the enemy either. The swarm adapts faster than we can develop new tactics. They're learning, evolving, while we're stuck in our old ways." Krell brought up one final display, a real-time feed of casualties from the front lines. The numbers kept ticking up, a relentless reminder of their failure. 300 years, he said softly, scales shifting to the white of despair. 300 years of the finest military minds in the galaxy trying to end this war. Each species training their best and brightest according to traditions thousands of years old. And what do we have to show for it? "A bunch of dead heroes and broken academies," muttered Sunlance. "Exactly." Krell slammed all 4 hands on the conference table, making the holograms flicker. "Which is why, against my better judgment, I'm starting to think these humans might be onto something with their crazy new academy." The room went silent, the kind of silence that happens when multiple species simultaneously express disbelief in their own unique ways. "You can't be serious," Thunder in Silence finally managed, her gaseous form swirling in patterns of shock. "Oh, but I am," Krell replied, his scales shifting to a determined gold. "Because right now, those Deathworlders and their insane ideas are the only ones showing any real progress in getting different species to work together. And if we're going to survive this war—" He paused, looking each commander in their respective sensory organs. "We might need a little insanity." The silence that followed was broken only by the steady beeping of the casualty counter. Each ping, another reminder that their traditional methods were costing lives they couldn't afford to lose. "And that, ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all quantum states," announced Cadet Sarah Stormbreaker Chen, standing upside down on the training room ceiling, "is how you adapt to variable gravity situations while maintaining tactical awareness." Her best friend, Zaxida Spex Luminar, a 6-limbed being with iridescent skin and compound eyes that could perceive 12 different dimensions, hung beside her. Well, technically he was levitating, but he'd positioned himself upside down in solidarity. "You know," Spex commented, adjusting his gravity neutralizers, "when you first suggested we train in inverted positions to understand how different species perceive spatial relationships, I thought you'd finally cracked from Earth's high gravity." Sarah grinned, her short black hair defying artificial gravity in a way that made her look like a manga character. That's because you, my multidimensional friend, lack the human gift of being just crazy enough to make the impossible work. Below them, or above them depending on your perspective, 20 other cadets of various species were attempting to navigate the obstacle course. A gelatinous blob named Bubble was actually doing quite well, having no fixed orientation to begin with. The four-winged Sylph twins were struggling until they realized they could use their wings as sensory organs in the inverted gravity field. "Commander Stone's going to flip when he sees your training modifications," Specs warned, though his skin was flickering with patterns that Sarah had learned meant amusement. "Please," Sarah snorted, doing a casual somersault to avoid a floating training drone. Stone practically encourages this stuff. "Remember last week when I suggested we teach the crystalline cadets basketball to improve their trajectory calculations?" "How could I forget? First time in history someone used a slam dunk to explain quantum targeting." Their conversation was interrupted by a loud crash, followed by what translated roughly as "sorry" in 15 different languages. A magma walker named Ember had accidentally collided with a void dancer, their conflicting environmental suits creating a brief but spectacular light show. "No apologies needed," Sarah called out, expertly maneuvering through floating debris. "This is exactly why we're doing this. In real combat, you'll have to deal with way worse than bumping into your squad mates." She reached the two cadets, helping Ember stabilize their cooling systems, while Specs used his extra limbs to recalibrate the void dancer's spatial orientation device. This kind of thing would have caused a diplomatic incident in any traditional academy. Here, it was just another teaching opportunity. "See?" Sarah explained, pulling a marker from her pocket and drawing a quick diagram on a nearby wall. "Ember's magma core generates a localized gravity field that actually helps stabilize Void's phase shifting, if you time it right." "We could use the gravitational interference as a tactical advantage," both alien cadets exclaimed simultaneously, their vastly different sensory organs lighting up with understanding. "Now you're thinking like a human," Sarah beamed. "Always looking for ways to turn problems into solutions, chaos into strategy." Specs floated over, his compound eyes spinning with calculations. "You know what the best part is? Traditional commanders would never think of this because they're too focused on keeping species separate. But here we are, turning our biological differences into tactical advantages." Sarah watched as her fellow cadets began experimenting with their new discovery, species pairing up in ways that would make traditional military instructors have seizures. A quantum ghost was teaching a silicon-based crystalline how to use their phase-shifting abilities in tandem. 3 light weavers were coordinating their beam patterns with a shadow walker's void projections. "This," Sarah said proudly, still casually standing on the ceiling, "is what humanity brings to the galactic table. We don't just think outside the box, we take the box, turn it inside out, and use it as an improvisational tactical shelter." "You're insane," Specs noted affectionately, his skin rippling with patterns of pride and friendship. "Exactly," Sarah laughed, pulling out her training schedule. "Now, who's ready for tomorrow's lesson? I'm thinking we combine zero-G dodgeball with basic quantum entanglement principles." The collective groan that echoed through the training room somehow managed to sound enthusiastic, even coming from species that didn't technically have vocal cords. After all, that was the magic of Earth's first mixed-species academy. It made the impossible seem merely improbable, and the improbable become inevitable. The training room's artificial gravity had just reset to normal when the first blast hit the station. Red emergency lights flooded the chamber as the station's AI blared out warnings in 57 different languages. "Warning, swarm fleet detected. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Sarah Chen's training kicked in before her conscious mind could even process the situation. "Everyone, environmental suits on. Specs, what are you seeing?" Zaxator Specs. Luminar's compound eyes whirled frantically, each one scanning a different dimensional plane. "Not good, Storm. Multiple swarm vessels, at least 3 hive ships. They're using some kind of dimensional folding to mask their approach. That's why our early warning systems failed." The station shuddered again as another blast struck home. Through the quantum-reinforced windows, they could see the horrifying sight of swarm ships, organic mechanical horrors that seemed to defy the laws of physics, emerging from tears in space-time. "Station Command, this is Cadet Chen. What's our situation?" Sarah called into her comm unit. Static crackled. Then Admiral Krell Brightscale's voice came through, strained and broken. "This is *static*. Command center hit. *static*. Senior officers down. *static*. No response from Fleet Command." Another blast rocked the station. This time, emergency force fields flickered to life as sections of the hull began to breach. Admiral Brightscale." Sarah's calls met only static. She turned to face the room full of cadets, each from a different species, each looking to her with their various sensory organs. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were students, training for future conflicts, not— "Storm," Specs called out urgently. "The command center's been completely destroyed. Life signs indicate 80% of senior staff are either dead or incapacitated. The rest are trapped in sealed sections of the station." The reality of their situation hit like a quantum torpedo. They were alone. A bunch of cadets from different species, half-trained, facing one of the largest swarm attacks in recent history. And they were the only ones left who could do anything about it. "Right." Sarah straightened up, channeling every leadership lesson she'd ever learned. "Specs, you're my second. Ember, take 3 Lightweavers and get to engineering. Keep those force fields up. Bubble, your species can survive vacuum. Get a team together and start emergency hull repairs." "But we're not ready," called out a Void Dancer cadet, their dark matter form rippling with fear. "We're still in training. The senior commanders—" "Are not here." Sarah cut them off. "Look around you. What have we been training for? To work together, to turn our differences into strengths. Everything we've learned in this crazy academy has been preparing us for exactly this kind of situation." Another blast. The station's AI updated its threat assessment. "Swarm forces advancing, station defenses at 43% and falling. Estimate 18 minutes until critical failure. Quantum ghosts, phase through the sealed sections, get any survivors to medical. Silicon crystallines, your bodies can channel energy, help restore power to critical systems. Shadow walkers, use your void projections to mask our emergency broadcasts. We need to get a distress signal out." The cadets sprang into action, their training overriding their fear. Sarah turned to Specs, who was still scanning dimensional planes. "What about the swarm ships? There has to be a weakness." "I'm seeing something weird," Specs replied, his iridescent skin flickering with concentration. "The way they're using dimensional folding. It's complex, but it reminds me of something." "Of what?" Sarah demanded, helping a wounded magma walker to their feet. "Remember that game you taught us? The one with the ball and the hidden cups? 3-card Monty, but with quantum states?" A crazy idea began to form in Sarah's mind. The kind of idea that only a human would come up with, and only this insane mixed-species academy could execute. "Specs, you're a genius. Get every cadet with dimensional perception abilities to the auxiliary control room. Bubble, belay that hull repair. I need your fluid dynamics expertise. Void Dancers, Shadow Walkers, remember that convergence maneuver we practiced last week? The one that nearly got us all detention?" Ember called back, their magma core pulsing with recognition. "Exactly," Sarah grinned, the kind of grin that made senior commanders nervous. "Ladies, gentlemen, beings of all quantum states, we're about to pull off the biggest shell game in galactic history." The station rocked with another hit, but this time the cadets kept their footing. They'd trained for this. Not this exact scenario, but for working together, for thinking on their feet, for turning chaos into victory. "Storm," Specs said quietly as the others rushed to their positions. "If this doesn't work, then we'll go down in history as the craziest cadets who ever lived," Sarah finished. "But if it does work—" She didn't need to finish the thought. Through the windows they could see the swarm ships advancing, their biomechanical forms distorting space itself. But for the first time since the attack began, Sarah felt something beyond fear or duty. She felt hope. Because while the swarm might understand traditional military tactics, while they might have counters for traditional species-specific strategies, they had never faced anything like this. They had never faced a group of cadets trained by humans to think outside every box in existence. They had never faced the graduates of Earth's first mixed-species academy, and they were about to learn why that was a very, very big mistake. "All right, everyone," Sarah's voice crackled through the emergency comms system. "Remember dodgeball training? This is exactly like that, except instead of balls, we're dodging biomechanical death ships." From his makeshift command post in the auxiliary medical bay, Admiral Krell Brightscale watched in horror as the surviving cadets implemented what they were calling Operation Playground. His scales had turned a sickly shade of green that hadn't been seen since the great space nausea epidemic of 2847. "They're going to get us all killed," he muttered, watching as Sarah directed her forces with the enthusiasm of a sports coach at a championship game. "Light Weavers, you're our offensive line. Quantum Ghosts, you're running interference, just like that football play we practiced. Bubble, get ready for the biggest game of keep-away in history." The veteran commanders who had managed to survive the initial attack stared at their tactical displays in mounting disbelief. The cadets had completely abandoned traditional formation protocols. Instead, were they actually flying in patterns based on human sports plays? "Look alive, people," Sarah called out. "Specs, run the dimensional shell game, just like three-card Monty, but with entire sections of space-time." Saxator coordinated with the other dimensionally aware cadets, their combined abilities creating rippling distortions in reality. The swarm ships, trying to track their movements, began to show signs of confusion. "They're actually falling for it," Specs reported, his compound eyes spinning with glee. "The swarm's hive mind can't process our pattern because there isn't one. We're using pure chaos theory combined with Earth playground logic." A grizzled veteran commander who had survived 14 major battles grabbed a comm unit. "This is insanity. You need to form proper battle lines, establish tactical formations. You can't fight a war like it's some kind of game." "Watch us," Sarah replied cheerfully. "Ember, remember that move from basketball practice? Time for a cosmic full-court press." The Magma Walker led a team of mixed-species cadets in what could only be described as a sports play through space. They used their various natural abilities in perfect synchronization. Void dancers creating spatial distortions, light weavers bending radiation, silicon crystallines channeling energy patterns. "What in the name of the cosmic consciousness is happening?" Admiral Brightscale demanded, his scales shifting through colors faster than a malfunctioning rainbow generator. "We're playing Capture the Flag," Sarah announced proudly. "Except the flag is the swarm's command ship, and we're using multidimensional space as our playground." The veteran commanders watched, jaws dropped, those who had jaws, as the cadet forces executed maneuvers that defied every principle of military strategy. They moved like a sports team, passing opportunities to each other, setting up assists, running interference patterns straight out of Earth's playbooks. 10 seconds to phase 2, Sarah called out. "Bubble, show them why you were MVP in last week's 0G volleyball tournament." The gelatinous cadet expanded suddenly, their amorphous form creating a massive gravitational lens effect. The swarm ships, already confused by the dimensional shell game, found their sensors completely scrambled. "Shadow Walkers, quarterback snap on my mark," Sarah's voice rang with pure joy. "Just like we practiced in the simulation room. Though, maybe don't tell Commander Stone we were using his tactical simulators to practice sports plays." The veteran commanders could only watch as the cadets executed what appeared to be a perfect football play, in space, using quantum physics and alien biology instead of a ball. The swarm ships, their hive mind unable to process this completely illogical approach to combat, began to break formation. "This is unprecedented," whispered an ancient strategic AI that had analyzed battles for centuries. "They're applying game theory in its most literal form." The swarm's tactical computers cannot compute responses because they're not following any known military doctrine. That's because it's not military doctrine, Sarah laughed over the comms. It's PE class with quantum physics. Specs, ready for the final play? Remember, just like mini-golf, but with gravitational singularities. Admiral Brightscale's scales had settled on a unique shade that perfectly represented existential confusion. They're going to win, he realized suddenly. They're actually going to win using playground games. Time for the game-winning shot, Sarah announced. And remember everyone, in zero-G dodgeball, like in space combat, if you can dodge a quantum torpedo, you can dodge anything. The swarm's command ship hung dead in space, its biomechanical systems thoroughly confused by what their tactical computers insisted was impossible combat doctrine. Around it, the remainder of the once mighty swarm fleet drifted in disarray, their hive mind connections scrambled by what Sarah Chen was proudly calling the greatest game of spatial hot potato ever played. And that's game, set, and match, Sarah announced over the station's comm system, doing a victory spin in her battlesuit. Someone want to check the scoreboard? Speck's compound eyes whirled as he ran the statistics. Swarm fleet neutralized, 0 casualties on our side, though I think we might have violated about, 300 years of established combat protocols. Admiral Krell Brightscale stood in the Auxiliary Command Center, surrounded by veteran commanders whose combined centuries of experience had just been upended by a bunch of cadets playing games. His scales had settled on a peculiar mixture of pride and bewilderment. "Would someone," he asked carefully, "please explain to me exactly what just happened?" "Oh, that's easy." Sarah floated into the command center, followed by her mixed species team. "We used synchronized volleyball formations to disrupt their sensor patterns, basketball zone defense to protect our critical systems, and the final punch was basically a game of multi-dimensional soccer, though I guess we should credit mini-golf for the winning shot." "Mini-golf," repeated a veteran commander faintly. "We just watched you end a battle using mini-golf principles." "Well, yeah," Bubble chimed in, their gelatinous form rippling with excitement. "Sarah taught us that games are just simplified combat scenarios. Once we stopped thinking like soldiers and started thinking like players, everything became possible," finished Ember, their magma core pulsing with pride. "The swarm couldn't adapt because they were looking for military strategies, not, what did you call it, Storm?" "Playground physics." Sarah beamed. "Turns out when you combine children's games with quantum mechanics and multi-species cooperation, you get something so crazy it actually works." Admiral Brightscale's scales shifted to the gold of revelation. 300 years, he said softly. "We've been fighting this war for 300 years, using tactics and strategies refined over millennia, and all it took to change everything was letting different species play together," Specs finished, his iridescent skin patterns dancing with joy. "Humans didn't just teach us new ways to fight. They taught us new ways to work together, to have fun together." The veteran commanders watched as the cadets celebrated, each in their own unique way. Lightweavers creating victory auroras, void dancers performing gravity-defying victory dances, silicon crystallines resonating at frequencies that somehow sounded like cheerful laughter. "I believe," Admiral Brightscale announced, his scales now shimmering with determination, "we need to completely revise our military training protocols. Cadet Chen, would you and your team be interested in teaching veteran commanders how to play?" Sarah's grin could have powered a small sun. "You mean turn the entire Galactic Defense Force into one big mixed-species sports team? Breaking down barriers, creating new strategies, and having fun while saving the galaxy?" "Precisely," the Admiral nodded, then added with what might have been a touch of humor, "though perhaps we should classify the exact details of today's battle. I'm not sure the galaxy is ready to know they were saved by a game of space mini-golf." "Too late," Bubble announced cheerfully, their form projecting holographic recordings. "Already went viral on the quantum net. We're trending in 7 dimensions." As the veterans began peppering the cadets with questions about zone defense and full-court press tactics, Sarah floated next to Admiral Brightscale. You know what the best part is? The swarm's already requesting peace talks. Apparently they're fascinated by the concept of games and want to learn how to play. Krell Brightscale, his scales now cycling through colours of hope and amusement, watched as a silicon crystalline attempted to teach a veteran commander the basics of basketball. Perhaps, he mused, this is what we needed all along. Not better weapons or strategies, but a reminder that sometimes the best way to end a war is to teach everyone how to play together. Exactly, Sarah grinned. Now who's up for celebratory zero-G dodgeball? Winner gets to name the first interspecies sports academy. And as the command center erupted into enthusiastic chaos, Admiral Brightscale realized that the galaxy would never be quite the same again. After all, how could it be? Now that humanity had introduced the concept of recess to interstellar warfare,